I just love that song so much. I just love that song so much. I can't tell you how much I love that Petula Clark music. Hi, everybody. It's Bill Whittle, Stratosphere Lounge, episode number 45. Sounds a little funny. There's a little distortion in here somehow. Maybe that's a little better. Seems like that might be a little better. How's everybody doing? Been another busy week here at the salt mines, slaving in the underground sugar caves, and got a lot of stuff done, a lot of stuff left to do, and a lot of stuff to talk about today. So it's always good to be here. I'm really liking this business of taking the highest ranking questions. That seems to be a pretty good way to do the things. And other than that, I guess it's time to get ourselves some Stratosphere Lounge on. Before we get to the questions, a couple things. We're going to be putting on a new channel starting tomorrow. Not just new content, a whole new channel over at billwhittle.com. We're going to be doing the Big Bat Problems channel in honor of Halloween. So we'll get all that teased. We got some fun stuff to do with that, and I'll take just a little minute to tell you about all that stuff, then we'll get into your questions and have ourselves a little show, why don't we? I've been working on Aurora for quite a long time, and it's been nice to be able to do updates on the site. I'm going to try and do Aurora updates once a week on Saturday, just call it kind of a space Saturday. So we're going to get into, as we continue with the Aurora updates, we'll talk about the nature of the vessel and how the models come along and how the model and the ship really are, really in the beginning, the several first drafts of the show were just the entire story. And then I found out that really you needed to tell a story and that Aurora is really just the set, it's the stage. But the stage is important. The Enterprise is the stage for Star Trek, and Fort Apache is a stage, and a stagecoach is a stage, and all these other things are important. So we'll start getting into how the ship actually works and why we designed it the way we did and all that other stuff. So the problem with Aurora has been that it's a very, not super expensive, but it's an expensive movie to do. It's a big cast, a lot of effects, and a lot of production values in the frame. There's a lot of stuff going on in each frame. Virtually every frame is a process shot in that movie. The stuff on the ground has to have all of the hardware in the background. You got to believe that you're working at a private company that's manufacturing space vehicles, which means constantly you got trucks in motion, you got technicians, you got a cast of hundreds kind of things. You've got hardware, moving on cranes on the ceilings. You got vehicles launching and landing outdoors. And then, of course, the stuff on the ship is all in a pretty expensive set, and virtually everything on the set is a process shot one way or another. You got the exteriors and all that jazz. So it's an expensive movie to make. We can make movies pretty inexpensively these days, but even by those standards, pretty expensive movie to make. And so discussing this with Jeremy not too long ago, and he said you really should do something cheaper and faster. It would help get you back into shape, because I haven't been out on a feature film directing stuff for a while. Years and years and years. So I decided to go back and revisit an idea that I had in about 1999, 2000. I had an idea for something just kind of like this. I wanted something that was inexpensive, it could be done easily, but didn't look cheap and was clever. Just clever. Something really just different and interesting. And in the sweet spot, in the audience sweet spot, that kind of sci-fi horror, kind of horror date movie, a little bit of action. Action's a little expensive too, but there's some action beats, probably 3 or 4 big action beats in the thing. And I came up with an idea about 10 years ago that I liked an awful lot, and then I just put it aside and just concentrated on Aurora since 2005. But I'm going to trot this thing out, and I came up with a name for it in this go-round, just not too long ago, a couple of months ago. And the name actually helps me a lot, because the name gives me a sense of the vibe. The movie's called Big Bat Problems, with a question mark after it, and it's that question mark may not seem like much to you, but that question mark at the end of the title is what makes this movie, gives it its tone. If the movie was called Big Bat Problems, it would be an entirely different movie than Big Bat Problems. I could just tell you the basics of it. And the nice thing about adding a channel to BillWhittle.com is it's the kind of thing we can update weekly as well, just give you constant updates on where that's going. And since that'll actually happen first, I have a lot more stuff in the bank with Aurora, but Big Bad Problems will start catching up pretty quick. Still have to finish the script, which is so... I've pitched it so many times and spoken to so many people about, friends, pitched it to them that it's... I don't know, it's about ready to go. But it's basically a sci-fi horror movie, and it's about an alien invasion. But it's about an alien invasion in a way that I don't think I've ever seen anything really done before quite like this. In one sense, Invasion of the Body Snatchers had the same idea. The aliens invade by turning us into them. But in this particular case, it's not. We don't look like them. They basically do something with nanobots and stuff, where if somebody gets bitten or infected by one of these little agents of these things, then these nanobots start working on their body internally and transform us into them. And they literally transform people into them biomechanically by messing around with our DNA, and it's just really clever. And then the thing about, if I do say so myself, and the thing I really like especially is that the tone of it is really where I want to be. I want to be. I don't want it to be taken too seriously. I wouldn't call it a straight horror story, but it's not camp either. It's just a little bit lighthearted. It's a little bit, I don't know. It's right on that margin between comedy and adventure, which I think is a really interesting place to be. Buckaroo Banzai lived in that space, and I think I'm not quite as far out as Buckaroo Banzai is, but I got some very interesting characters, and I got a terrific story, and it's very topical. We've got drone strikes, and we've got people monitoring other people through their webcams and all that stuff. And I think I've still got a little bit of concept art up from before, so I'll just give you a quick little tease of it here. Let's see if this works. This is one of our very first drawings about what this transformation would look like. They're not actually bats, of course. They just look like bats. They're perceived to be bats. They're basically turning us into alien warriors. And the whole first act of the movie is the transformation of one guy from a human being into one of these things. And again, this is all still pretty early concept art, but we've improved it some since then. And with having Big Bad Problems up on BillWhittle.com, we will have a chance to give you updates on this thing. So there's another set of drawings, and then we did a little more detailed rendering on the head. Now the artist took the skull out, took the skin off the skull. The thing's going to have a kind of a bulge on its head, a big bulge, a little more prominent than this one because they're echolocators. So anyway, as you can see, we got a lot of fun stuff that we can tease and stuff that we can kind of come back to. And the concept art is coming in, routinely. So we get a chance to really update it and really play with it. And the thing of it is, it's just fun. That's really the word I'm looking for. It's just fun. The politics in it are considerably more subtle than they are in Aurora. I mean, Aurora is about private enterprise, about guys using their own money, basically running from the government before the government shuts them down to go out and pull off this Jupiter mission before they get arrested. And Big Bad Problem's a lot more subtle than that. It's basically people who've encountered these things personally, traveling around in kind of an ad hoc convoy of all these weirdos and misfits. But they have their own weapons, they have their own technology, and the government's trying to stop them from doing this on their own. How dare you, citizens, trying to protect yourselves and other people on your own? That's the government's job. So I really, really love it. I think it's just a terrific idea. I'm crazy about the story. I'm crazy about the characters, and the dialogue I think is just clever. And the dialogue in a movie like this can be snappier and sassier than it can be in something that's really kind of a straight drama like Aurora is. This thing you can actually have some fun with, really, just be clever with. So anyway, starting tomorrow, hopefully, on Halloween, we'll start up the Big Bad Problem on BillWhittle.com, give you another channel to look at over there. And as usual, if it's something you like and something you want to see more of, if you'd like to become a subscriber, that's how these things happen. That's the show continues and everything else continues. So far, we've been open for a couple weeks. We're real happy with the conversion rate on the subscribers. We haven't had the big traffic pushes that we'd like yet, although we're going to start to break that first virtual presidency thing out tomorrow or the next day, get it out there finally, and start driving some real traffic to this site. So everything else is kind of good. We got to a steady state place finally, I think, and beyond that, I'm busy. So let's get started here. We took, as I said, we took the most popular questions in terms of the likes. And the first one was from a guy named Walter Almeida, and he had 5 questions, and I'm not going to take them all. I'm virtually positive everybody wanted to know the answer to the last question, but he had 5, and I liked 4 and 5, so I'll take 4 and 5 as well. So here we go. He says, my wife and I just got started into astronomy. Just started getting into astronomy. We've seen the ISS fly over twice. It is awesome. It's the second brightest thing in the sky after Venus. The ISS is just this golden light moving at 17,800 miles an hour. And if you haven't seen ISS, you really should. By the way, if you want to see ISS, there's 2 things that you can get on your iPhone. I love them. Let me make sure I get the names right. I don't know if the apps exist for Android and stuff, but for the iPhone, they're terrific. Made by the same company. They're called one is called Go Sat Watch. It's a satellite locator, and the other one's called Go Sky Watch, which is a handheld planetarium. And they're great on your iPhone. They're even better on your iPad. You have a little more visual space. Go Sat Watch and Go Sky Watch. They're iPhone apps, and they're terrific. If you get Go Sat Watch, you can enter your location, and then it'll tell you what satellites are overhead, what their brightness is. It'll give you a little map of the sky, and as you move the phone around, the map of the sky rotates, and you can see them. And if you see the ISS, it's just absolutely stunning how bright that thing is. Really spectacular. So anyway, he says, we've seen the ISS fly by, and we just recently saw Venus for the first time. Venus is in the evening sky right now here on the West Coast, just getting dark. It may have already set in the East Coast, but that bright white, pearly white light in the western sky, it's out for at least another hour or 2 after sunset. That's Venus in the west, and eventually as it comes around inside the Earth's orbit, it'll get closer and closer to the sun, pass between the Earth and the sun, though not directly between us because those are very rare. It's a transit of Venus. We're not going to see another one of those for another 180 years or something. And then as it gets on the other side of the Earth's orbit, or I should say on the other side of the sun relative to the Earth's orbit, it'll become the morning star. And you'll see it in the morning just before sunrise. But right now it's the evening star, so that's Venus in the west, and Jupiter's rising in the east and not too long after sunset. So how do you get to learn about all this stuff? So his question is, Jupiter and its moons are so beautiful. Any tips for folks getting into astronomy? You really can't do a whole lot worse than getting a pair of binoculars. And if you can afford a little telescope, and I mean the tiniest ones they sell, the smallest little telescopes you can buy, can show you really remarkable things. I know I was hooked. I got a telescope for Christmas when I was 12, and that telescope I got, I saw it in September, October in a camera store. I was late for a bus coming home from school in Bermuda, and I was poking around waiting for the next bus, and I was in this camera shop, which didn't really interest me much, but there was this telescope up on the counter, and it was a reflector telescope, a Newtonian reflector. And I liked the little gears, and I liked the controls and stuff. And I looked inside the telescope, and instead of seeing a piece of glass on the front end, the tube was basically hollow. And down at the back end, about 4 feet away, was a little round mirror, little round concave mirror. And the idea that a mirror could be a telescope really interested me. I decided I really wanted it for Christmas, so I made a deal with my dad. I'd work for half of it. I'd get the other half for Christmas. And that meant I had about 2-3 months of waiting. Now, I read a book called Field Guide to the Stars and Planets by Donald Menzel. They've reissued it 100 times now, but I saw it back in 72, 73. And like everything else I do that I get excited about, I just went into this thing whole hog. And I just studied everything. There were photographic plates of the sky, learned the constellations. I learned where various nebulae and star clusters were in the constellations, learned, the planets, what we knew about them. We didn't know anything really back in 1971, 72. We knew what we'd known for 100 years. And then all of a sudden the, Voyager starts in 72, and we start seeing pictures of these places. And then Hubble comes on, and we start seeing better pictures. But I grew up in that magic time where, in the beginning, we didn't know a whole lot, and I got to watch. I'd see a Hubble Space Telescope of the Orion Nebula after having seen just a Earth-based telescope picture of the Orion Nebula. And so I actually lived in that absolutely once-in-history time. Anybody prior to me only saw the old stuff. Anybody after me will only see the new stuff, but I saw the new stuff as it was coming in. I'd see the first picture I ever saw, the best picture of Jupiter, just by way of example, was a fairly fuzzy picture of Jupiter that showed most of the major cloud bands. And then in comes the Voyager data, and it's like, holy cow. Well, first the Pioneer data, Pioneer 10 and 11, and then the Voyager data, and then the Galileo data. So if you have an interest in astronomy, this is the only time in history to be alive. You really get the anticipation, and then you get to see. Kids in the future will always have maps of the planet Pluto. We don't have any idea what Pluto looks like, but we're going to find out in 2 years when Far Horizons gets there. So that's pretty cool. But I think probably the best way to do it is real simple. Go outside on a dark night, and it's worth driving out of the city for this. If you have any interest in it all, you really need to drive at least an hour out of a major city. Find a dark sky, go on a moonless night, or a perfect night would be go on a night where the moon either is up at sunset but will set within an hour or two, or won't rise for another hour or two, because the moon destroys everything else. But the moon in itself is pretty cool. So just go out and find yourself a dark sky and, poke around. If something looks fuzzy to your eye, if it looks smudgy and blurry, it's probably a nebula or a dense star cluster. Train a little telescope on that, it gets resolved. Seeing the Pleiades, which are fairly close to Orion's shoulder. It's a little collection of stars that many people call the Little Dipper. It looks like a little tiny dipper, but the Little Dipper is actually in Ursa Minor. It's part of the North Star, is part of the Little Dipper. But anything in the light that looks fairly bright is somewhat interesting. When I got the telescope, it was Christmas night. I guess it was Christmas Eve. And I took it outside, and I took a look at a star. And a star, frankly, in a telescope, a bright star in a telescope, looks the same as a star without a telescope. It's just brighter. But the second thing I looked at was Saturn. And I knew where Saturn was. And I saw Saturn in a little tiny little telescope about, that wide. And I put the eyepiece in there, and I turned it on Saturn, got it centered up, and then I focused that eyepiece. And you could see this tiny, tiny little BB with little rings around it. And I'm telling you, after that, I was done. There's no way to describe that feeling of seeing the rings of Saturn with your own eyes. The same thing for the moons of Jupiter. The bright light in the east that's rising, bright white light in the east is Jupiter. And if you take even pair of binoculars out there and can hold them steady enough, you'll see a little disk of the planet. And you'll see anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, maybe sometimes none, but that's very rare. Usually you see at least 2 or 3, and often all 4 little sparks in a little even line right around it. Those are the Galilean moons. If you take a telescope and point it at Venus, the evening star, you'll see a crescent. Mars will show you a little red disk, and on a good night with a decent-sized telescope, you might even see a little white spot for the polar caps. And then things like, the nebulae, things like even a bright nebula like the Orion Nebula is a lot more of an acquired taste kind of thing. A nebulae in a telescope is just a brighter smudge. You can see a little bit more detail, but you will never see, I hate to break this to you, you will never see through your telescope with the naked eye, no matter what size telescope you have, you'll never see this brilliant, colorful structure. And that's a result of a time exposure. There's just the biggest telescope I've ever looked through was probably, 40-inch telescope. Even on the Orion Nebula, you see detail, and those smudges are brighter, but you don't get that kind of color. With that said, star clusters are fantastic, but just look at the moon. And you take a little telescope out and look at the moon, and And the moon will keep you busy for years. And there's just so much neat stuff to see out there. Do not ever, 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 ever point a telescope at the sun. I know I don't need to tell you that, but don't do that. And if your telescope is one of the older ones, they used to have and I did this until I found out it was really dangerous. They used to have something called a solar filter that you would screw onto the eyepiece. You put the eyepiece in the telescope, and the solar filter was a very dense piece of glass. And you could look at the sun with it and see sunspots. But the problem with that is that now you're focusing the sunlight with that telescope, and it can actually crack that little piece of welder's glass, of astronomically dense glass. The only safe way to look at the sun is with something called a full aperture filter that sits over the front of the telescope so that light doesn't get in there in the first place. Or, of course, you can always project it onto a card. But if you look through the telescope at the sun, you're going to go blind. But other than that, you can go pretty damn blind looking at the moon. The full moon will blind you for the night. Won't hurt your eyes, obviously. By the way, somebody, I forget what it was, but somebody once did the calculation. I might get this 100% wrong, but it was astonishing. I think somebody asked me how much brighter sunlight was than moonlight is, full moon. And you want to think it's like, 30 times brighter, 50 times brighter. It's like, apparently it's 100,000 times brighter. So our eyes have the ability to really open up and close. So look, if you're interested in getting into astronomy, Walter, get out there, go find a dark sky. If you can afford a little telescope, find out where Jupiter is. There's lots of ways to do it online. There's lots of online planetariums. This Go Skywatch thing I pointed out, I would never have left the house with this thing. Go Skywatch. Let's see if I can just show you real quick on the iPhone here. Unbelievable. It really is. It's just absolutely amazing. Okay, point up to start motion control. Come on, give it to me, baby. Is it working? Yep. Okay, so Go Skywatch. As you turn the phone around and as you tilt it up and down, it shows you, sorry about the light reflection there, it shows you different parts of the night sky. So you literally can go outside with this thing, and if you see a bright light in the sky, you can hold this up to it, and the phone knows where it is on the Earth through the GPS, and then it knows very carefully what its tilt is. And you literally can just point this thing to something in the sky and then put it over that, and then this little cursor will come up and go, hey, that's the planet Venus. Hey, that's Sirius, the dog star. Hey, that's Saturn. Can't recommend these two things highly enough. Go Skywatch and Go Satwatch for satellites. They're tremendously cool. So that's actually kind of a freebie question, so I hope that helped you, Walter. I hope that helped anybody else. Astronomy is just the greatest thing in the whole wide world, and aside from the beauty of it and literally the wonder of it, if you start really getting into astronomy and start reading enough astronomy so that you understand what's actually going on out there, you acquire a couple of other major useful skills. First of all, you know where you are. I don't mean just where you are in terms of where you are in the galaxy or the solar system, but I've often wondered if you went outside and asked the average person, if you just went straight up into the air here and just kept going, what would you see? I don't think there's 1 in 100 who have any realistic idea of what you would see. I know, for example, part of this problem is caused by the people that did illustrations for books or do computer graphics nowadays. I'll see on Discovery Channel all the time. I'll see a CG rendering of the solar system, and you'll see the sun, and here's Mercury and Venus and Earth, and Earth looks like it's a quarter the size or a tenth the size of the sun, and it looks like it's 20, 30 Earth diameters away. Once you get into the actual astronomy, you begin to get a sense of the scale of things. Like, for example, somebody said this, it's an interesting thing to do. If you again, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I'm getting pretty close. If you hold a basketball representing the Earth and a baseball representing the moon, those are more or less the approximate sizes. How far away do you think the moon is from the Earth if the Earth is a basketball and the moon is a baseball? And most people might say they're, half an arm's length together. Maybe they're a full arm's length away. Maybe, the moon is maybe 5-10 feet away. It's some astonishing distance. It's like 200 feet. Or it's really out there. It's just shockingly far away. And the solar system is so vast that even giant planets and Earth, they're just specks. They're not these globes that are visible from other globes. You can't see other globes in the solar system. Anywhere in the solar system, if you're sitting on Mars, Jupiter will be a speck and a point, just like Mars is to us, and Earth will be a point. So you really begin to realize how big things are. And then as you get higher and higher and higher, you'll you'll visually see a sense that, okay, now the solar system is this little thing, and you just keep going and 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 keep going. And here's another little thing, and that's the next nearest star. And then you keep going, then you get to see the local cluster, and you keep going, and then you get to see the arm of the galaxy, and then you get to see the whole Milky Way. And then you go further and further and further and further and further, and there's just nothing. There's nothing, 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 nothing. Finally, you get far enough away so you can see the next nearest galaxies, the two Magellanic Clouds, small irregular galaxies. Magellanic Clouds are two little, they look like two little smudges in the southern hemisphere. They look like pieces of the Milky Way that broke off. It's not a bad way to describe it because they are little galaxies. And the two Magellanic Clouds orbit our Milky Way. But as you get further and further away, you find another spiral galaxy like the Milky Way, which is Andromeda, slightly bigger than our galaxy. Andromeda is the biggest galaxy in our local group, and we're second. And you just keep going, and it gives you a tremendous sense of perspective. And learning astronomy will also teach you some appreciation of large numbers, some appreciation of really genuinely vast numbers that most people don't get. So I can't say enough about it. By the way, two things I would recommend in addition, and then I'll move on. There is, I think it's virtually certain it's free software. I've got it on both PC and on the Mac. I like it a little better on the Mac. It's called Celestia, Celestia. It's a free download. Write that down and go get it right now. Celestia is a solar system explorer, and Celestia will allow you to do all kinds of things as you get more and more familiar with it. But one of the fun things I did in Celestia was you can set Celestia to travel. You can just touch on a planet, it'll just fly you there, and you'll see all the moons of Jupiter, and you turn on the orbits, and Jupiter just looks like a giant ball of string. I don't know how many moons, 60, 70 moons, 80 moons in orbit around Jupiter. So you can go anywhere in the solar system and see things. So Celestia is really awesome. But the other thing that's cool about Celestia is it will let you fly through the solar system. You can really probably fly it by a joystick, but you can certainly fly it using your arrow keys at whatever speed you set. And what is really shocking is if you get outside the Jovian system and set it for the speed of light, or if you've got, 15 minutes, just start heading from Earth to Jupiter at the speed of light. You think, man, speed of light, you're there in no time. No, it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And as you start to get into the Jovian system, you start to see, in Celestia, you'll see these orbits. You'll see these orbits just start to kind of, go past the camera as you enter the system. And then you begin to realize that the speed of light is not so damn fast after all. It takes, 10, 15 minutes to get to the Jovian system, and it easily takes 5 or 6, 7, 8 minutes to go through it. And as you approach the inner part of the Jovian system, you see the Galilean satellites, and Jupiter is like this. You're moving at the speed of light, and Jupiter just comes, it just comes like that. It's finite, and it's not that fast. And if you want to get that effect, that Star Trek effect of watching the stars begin to displace, you can go to the speed of light, nothing. Take you 4 years at that speed to get to the nearest star. 4 years at the speed of light, 4.5. So you set it to 10 times the speed of light, nothing. You set it to a parsec, a second, nothing. And then you just have to be moving unbelievably fast to get that. So Celestia is really, really, really excellent. And if you want a sense of the scale of the universe, there's a great video on YouTube called Powers of 10. And Powers of 10 was done when I was a kid, probably in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. And it's just two people sitting out in a picnic, and then they zoom up 10 times further away, and then another 10 times, and another 10 times, and another 10 times, just keep going up. Every single frame comes down as, 10 meters, 100 meters, 1,000, 10,000. And then they come all the way back and then go the other way down into the microverse. So it's all pretty cool. So much for perspective. Celestia and Powers of 10. I can't recommend Celestia high enough, and I'm virtually positive it's free. I think the question everybody voted up as number one on the list, however, was this. I'm finding as I grow older and keep seeing what's going on in the world that I'm having a difficult time being patient or tolerant with people on the left. I'm still as polite as I can be. I'm not hostile, but for example, I have culled a lot of lefty friends from my Facebook page and increasingly disliking people I know in real life because of their views. The sad part is some of these people are my own family, and it's difficult to enjoy being among people whose views I know are causing the absolute destruction of freedom in this country. I was born in communist Cuba. My parents didn't risk their lives to bring me here for these people to make it more like the place we fled from because of what those political views caused over there. At the same time, I don't want to become a bitter isolationist, and I want to feel close to and enjoy my family. Do you have any advice on how I should deal with this dilemma? Isn't that funny? I was in the DMV yesterday, just sitting there minding my own business for the 2.5 hours it took me to get to the end of the to sit in the line to get to 2 forms filled out. 2.5 hours, and this woman sat next to me, and she started up this conversation, and I particularly wasn't in a mood to talk, and she said, what do you think about this whole thing? I said, I think this is absolutely absurd. I think if they paid these people by the person, they'd be moving a lot faster. She goes, well, they're terribly underfunded. They're terribly, terribly underfunded here. Everybody has to work much harder. I'm a government worker myself, work for the federal government, and it's all a fault of those damn Republicans. It's those damn Republicans, and I'm like, she's going on and on and on. I said, I don't know what we're going to do about those damn Republicans. And I turned to her and said, well, you're sitting next to one, so why don't you watch what you're talking about and not just assume that everybody on the face of the earth has exactly your belief system. It's extremely offensive, and I'd like you to be quiet. So I don't care what you say about me, or I don't care what you think about what I say. Of course you do. You started the conversation in the first place. And I'm telling you, it's offensive, it's obnoxious, and it's just time for you to be quiet. Okay? I don't give a damn what you think. I don't want to hear it. You started talking to me. You want to be like this? That's fine. Just be quiet. And, it's the fault of the Republicans that the DMV is slow because of the budget cuts. Here in a state that hasn't had a Republican governor in, 6 years, and hasn't had a Republican House or Senate in 30 years. Somehow it's our fault. So, look, man, I know exactly what you're saying, Walter. I was at a family reunion back in July when I was sitting there out back when they announced the Trayvon Martin verdict, and everybody was like, oh, I guess it's just okay to... Obviously, if you're white in this country, you can just walk up and shoot anybody in the head. You can just walk up to somebody, as long as they're black and you're white, you can shoot anybody in the back of the head in this country. That's what this country is all about. And I just sat there and took it, And cousins who I grew up with, who I was really good with and bought a lot of presents for and stuff, or, they're just going, oh, Time Magazine, it used to be great until these goddamn Republicans ruined everything. And I'm not going back there. So I don't know what to tell you, buddy. I will not be, I'm certainly not going to agree with him. And I think certainly the case in the case of what I was just talking about, they knew full well what my politics are. They're pulling my chain, like the woman, and so it's one way or the other, right? It's either they're gonna just assume that you believe everything they believe, which is in LA anyway is an epidemic, and it's horrible and it's rude. Or, as in the case of my cousins, they know full well what I believe. They know perfectly well how I make my living, and they're just trying to pull my chain. And when you start arguing with them, when you start arguing back, they go, I don't want to talk politics. Oh, really? You didn't mind talking politics when you were basically, unloading on me. So now all of a sudden that I'm responding and you're losing, you don't want to talk politics anymore. I imagine, obviously, there must be some families out there who have liberal people who have conservative majorities, and I'm sure it happens where they go in and just say, "You damn liberals." But I swear, I don't see it's nearly that often. I think this happens 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times more often that liberals are bashing Republicans at family events rather than the other way around. And I think the reason for this is it's got to do with the nature of the ideology. I just started reading Mein Kampf. I hadn't read it forever because for the first part of my life, I was, under the same impression as everybody else that, it's toxic if you read it. If you read it, you're going to become a Nazi and it's going to completely mess you up. And then after I started, getting into this, then I just didn't read it because every single description of it I've ever heard just basically said it was unreadable. It's just unreadably bad. It's just dense. And it is unreadably bad. It is simply a lunatic dictating. There's no structure. There's no point. It's just stream of consciousness. It's virtually impenetrable. So why am I reading Mein Kampf? Well, I'm reading Mein Kampf because I read the 3-part history of Winston Churchill 3 times through. 3 parts, 3 times. And I figured I understand him pretty well. I understand a lot of these guys well. Now it's time to start understanding this guy well. And so there's a lot of stuff in there that is very, very interesting to me, although God knows you have to go looking for it. Because first of all, the first impression is when you read Mein Kampf, and I'm getting to a point here, by the way, Welder, it's written by a madman, and the anger and the rage from the first page to the last page, and the narcissism. I, me. Fate pointed me here. Fate taught me this lesson. Fate taught me this. Destiny took me here. It's unbelievable. But you didn't get to be Adolf Hitler and come to power in what was probably the most civilized nation on earth, at least in terms of, you can make the case in many areas of the culture, very civilized, very ordered, hardworking society. You didn't get to be that guy unless you knew something. Unless you knew something. There was something he knew about people and about the world. And I started reading it, and he knows a lot about things. He knows an awful lot about the way people behave, and he especially understands, because before he became the leader of the Nazi Party, Hitler was a lot like me. He was a starving artist wandering around and lived a great deal of time without any money at all, hung out in some dark places, and learned a lot about human nature and the underbelly of society. Needless to say, his entire appeal was to that aspect of society. And one of the many points that he's made that I thought were interesting, that were worth highlighting, was he said, if you have an ideology that's an aggressive ideology, it's going to defeat a passive ideology because of the kind of people that are attracted to it, and because of the structure of the philosophy. And I really think that's why we get so much more of an earful from liberals than they ever get from us. And I think also that's why they can't bear to listen to us. Their ideology, liberalism today, is your relatives, Welter. That entire ideology is predicated on the idea that I, as an advocate, and me as a liberal, as an individual liberal, I'm not talking about Noam Chomsky or any of these guys. I'm just saying, if I'm a liberal, so much of the appeal of liberalism is it allows me to feel like I'm better than other people. I'm smarter than other people because those Republicans are idiots, and Rush Limbaugh's an idiot, and Sarah Palin's an idiot, and all those other people are idiots. I'm smarter than other people, and I'm better than other people. I'm morally better. I'm in favor of black people, for instance. I'm not a racist. I'm not a homophobe. I'm not a misogynist like those Republicans are. It's a way to elevate yourself without having to think about it and without having to actually do anything about it. So you can say that Republicans are racist, and I'm not. I'm a good person. I'm not a bad person. I'm a liberal. Even though your liberal policies have destroyed black America, utterly destroyed it. That's what they can't bear to hear. You see, when you start coming at them with those kind of facts and that kind of evidence, that's the end of it. That's why they literally, I've seen this with my own eyes, literally put their fingers in their ears and walk away. Don't want to hear it? No, don't want to hear it. So the reason I brought up the Hitler thing with Mein Kampf, Welter, is that what liberalism is today, it's not what liberalism traditionally was. We're traditional liberals. We're all about freedom and private property, ownership, responsibility, cause and effect, reality, being left alone. But if you have a group of people in a country and half of them are of the philosophy that we just want to be left alone, that's a fundamentally passive and defensive philosophy. If you have the other half of the country that says no, 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 on the contrary, we have the right to tell people what to do, and we're going to tell them what to do, because if we tell people what to do, that will make us moral and good people. We're out there fighting evil, and we're out there fighting injustice. That's a much more aggressive, much more active ideology. And so I think that's why we do so terribly in the political arena, because I don't think conservative politics, I think on some level, a truly conservative politician is an oxymoron. If you're truly conservative, you want nothing to do with politics. You think government doesn't need to do all this stuff. If you're a genuine conservative, why would you go into politics? You'd go into something useful. You'd go into wealth creation, or you'd go into the military. You could say military is the government, but I'm not counting it as the government. I'm counting bureaucracy as the government. So we have people who have a fundamentally passive worldview, which is leave us alone. And you also have people who are fundamentally well-mannered. They don't want to go into a room full of people they care about and start a big fight. But these other people have to, because if you're a conservative in a party full of liberals, your mere presence, you don't have to say anything. I never said anything at that reunion. They just knew I was a liberal, conservative gladiator. And so they had to keep attacking me, and I didn't say a word. I didn't bring up politics. I didn't do anything. They had to throw little arrows and darts at me, because my very presence there meant that there was something other than liberalism. And they knew I was a smart guy. They watched me grow up. So if Bill's as smart as Bill is, yeah, pretty weak cheese here, but to whatever degree that, they've always known that about me, and now Bill's all of a sudden like this conservative champion, we don't want to think about why that is. We sure as heck don't want to listen to him. So they start throwing all these darts at you. And I don't know really what the answer is, Walter. There's no happy answer here. You can either fight back, which I will do when I get provoked enough. That woman at the DMV, who the hell do you think you are? Who the hell do you think you are? If you had sat there and said, why this problem with the DMV is because of the Jews. It's because of the Jews. Or if she said it's because of the blacks, that'd be intolerable. But to say it's because of Republicans and conservatives in a room full of people, she never for a second thought that anybody would push back against that. So she gets some pushback. Yeah. Here in California, really? This is the fault of the Republicans? You guys have been in power for 50 years. Are you trying to tell me that these budget cuts that you talked about 3 years ago or 4 years ago that the Republicans caused? Are you really trying to tell me, lady? This is what I said to her. That the DMV used to just hum. People used to just go down to the DMV in 1989, couldn't wait to get down there because it's a model of efficiency. Please. At the DMV, I said, this is government. This is what it is, and this is what people like you do. This is what people like you want. I haven't had a raise in 3 years. You don't deserve a raise. If this is what it is, there's nobody moving in here. Nobody's hustling in here. Nobody hustled. Some of those people were very nice. In fact, the people I met at the counter and the people I met were actually really nice people. But the structure is so appalling. The management system is so bad. They're so bad on so many ways. For a small little thing, there's no Wi-Fi in there. Well, what difference does it make? Why? Well, because if you've got 250 people sitting in a room, Wi-Fi would be nice. Every single one of them had a phone. Every single one of them had an iPad. No Wi-Fi. Why? Who cares? Who cares how long they wait? There's so many things that I could see just by glancing around the room. Forget about doing an actual study where I said if you just did that, we'd be out of here in half the time. But ultimately, just to go off on this little tangent here, the thing about the DMV is you have a system where every single person in the country, essentially every adult, is going to have to go to this place in the course of their lives. Sometimes you have to go more than others. And so, just like with Obamacare, there's one place to go. There's a DMV on the west side of LA. There's a DMV in the Valley in Van Nuys. And so, that's it. And so if you want to fix this, I was tweeting out, it's like, somebody please privatize this soul-destroying thing. What's actually physically happening here? People are entering data into a computer, and in exchange for this, they are handing you a little tiny piece of plastic, a little sticker, which you will put onto your license plate. And then they'll print out something that comes out of a computer. So I tweeted, "This is horrible. Will somebody please privatize this?" And somebody on Twitter wrote back, "Well, don't just criticize it. What do you mean? How would that work?" I said, "It's very simple. In every neighborhood in the country, like any other business, how many will the market bear? There's a lot of Starbucks out there, but in any given neighborhood, in any given city, instead of the valley, San Fernando Valley is this gigantic, huge conglomeration. There's one DMV. How many McDonald's are there in the San Fernando Valley? I don't know, 30? So why not have a DMVs R Us on one corner and a McRegistration on the other corner and License King on the third corner, and you look at the lines and you look at the cost, because they have to charge extra. Would you pay an extra $5 to save yourself 2.5 hours? I'd pay a lot more than that. I would have paid a lot more than $5 more to get out of that. But really, what are you doing? You're just standing in line. You hand somebody a paper. They take a look at it. They enter some number into a computer. They give you a little ticket, which you could barcode scan, and the number goes into the computer anyway. What difference does it make? What difference does it make? You want to charge $10 for that service? Fine. Or 20 or 50 or whatever. And I just don't understand it. This is what they're trying to do to everything. And this is why I'm a conservative, because the DMV doesn't work. They don't care. I was looking at people sitting there just chatting. If you're going to take your break, folks, can you at least take your break in a back room so that I don't have to see that the main line of people that is fed, you come in the door to ask questions, decide where you're going to go. I don't have to see that there's nobody at that station for 10 minutes, and then instead of 2 people, there's 1 person. I don't want to see you sitting there chatting, having your coffee. Go have your coffee in a back room where I don't have to be insulted by the fact that this is it. The wait time at the DMV was 176 minutes, was what they were advertising on the screen. I was there for 2.5 hours. Because they don't care. Why would they care? Why do they care? This is what government is. No one's responsible. No one makes more. If you do a better job, they don't get any more money. This woman who's complaining about not getting a raise in 3 years, she doesn't get a raise in 3 years because it doesn't matter whether she does her job well or badly. It doesn't matter for the company whether the entire company performs well or badly. It just doesn't matter. It's a catastrophe. And I have to tell you this, Walter, the whole point of your point was you came over from Cuba. You know what this is like. I've talked to people from Cuba, and I've talked to people from Russia and people from Bulgaria, and they say the worst part of socialism is just that they make you wait in line for everything. That's it. That's all they do. They don't care. No one cares. So anyway, I don't know what to tell you about this with the families. I will simply tell you, if you can swallow it, don't pick any fights. If they actually really say something that's so stupid you can't handle it, then trump their moral superiority. Because you, Walter, have the ability, in a way that most Americans don't, you have the ability to actually just go in there and win the argument on the terms that they fight it. You can say, well, my relatives were killed because of what you just said, or my people have been starving for 60 years now because of what you just said. So it may be easier for you to make a statement like that, but I got on a raft or I got on an airplane and left everything I had behind me to get away from that stuff. So you might want to think about what you're saying. That kind of stuff is very powerful. You can convince some people. You convince all of them if you can get them to listen. You just have to tie them up long enough so they can hear what you have to say, and then you just release them back into the wild, and they'll change. Anyway, we're only going to do one question tonight if I don't keep up the pace here, because I got to be done at 7:30, and so let's move on. Number 2 is from a guy named Donnie Brooks. And if Donnie Brooks is not a pseudonym, then good for you, Donnie Brooks, because Donnie Brooks is a really cool name. He says, you always talk about entertainment that presents our case and our side as heroes to win the culture. What avenue of entertainment do you think is the most important or the most well-suited? I know people whose entire lives have been changed by a movie, or people who base their entire worldviews on the songs of a particular person. Just curious what you thought. Well, they all matter. A great movie stays with you probably more than anything else in the world. But I will say this, the situation has changed really remarkably in the last 3 or 4 years. I do a show at PJTV with Andrew Klavan, that No Good for Nothing Lowlife. And he has talked about, there was the golden age of television, which was back in the start of television. He's calling this the platinum age of television. He's absolutely right. When I was making movies for my entire life, I only had this revelation within the last year or two. I thought, I don't want to be on TV. TV is a little box about this big. It's very fuzzy. It's tinny sound, and I don't want my big story on a little box like this. Now, I have a 60-inch LCD TV, and I've got the little sound bar, and when I'm watching TV, I feel like I'm in a movie theater, and I don't have to put up with all the movie theater stuff. So it's a different experience. It is a cinematic experience now, television, and I think, to answer your question directly, Donnie, I think the most effective thing that we can do is to make it a series like The Walking Dead. Because if you've got something like that, Breaking Bad, Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, Sopranos, my personal favorite, Deadwood, you get to see people, you get 12, Downton Abbey, you get 10, 12, 15, 20 hours of people a season. That's a whole different animal than 2 hours. You can do things with characters. You can do things with story arcs. You can do all kinds of great things. But the reason I think it's much more effective culturally is, if you take Breaking Bad or Walking Dead just as an example, it's not a one-time movie. It's like you get a great movie every week, and then the conversation, the coffee table, the coffee room conversation, the water cooler conversation, every week. What's going to happen on Thursday? Or did you see last night's show? Or I can't believe they killed this guy. That's real cultural penetration. So if I could do anything, I would do that. If I could take Aurora from being a movie to being a series like that, something that was, something that was on TV every week for an hour with those kind of production values up on and this is the critical point, by the way. I can't believe I came to this last. The primary difference is no commercials, right? You get it on HBO or you get it on AMC or something. I know they have commercials on shows like Breaking Bad and stuff, but man, if you can get on like HBO or Showtime or Netflix or something like that, and not have commercials, good Lord, that's better than a movie. It's a 15-hour movie. And I realized, that my love for Star Trek, the original Star Trek, didn't come about as a result of the movies. I thought, with the exception of Wrath of Khan, the movies were pretty poor. But I realized, as this began to dawn on me, the impact of a TV series, a regular weekly TV series, is I spent 72 hours with Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock and Dr. McCoy, Well, 52-minute hours or however many, 48-minute hours, whatever there are when you take the commercial time out of it. But they ran 72 episodes over 3 seasons. 72 hours aboard the Enterprise is a long time. And that gives you not just a one-time experience like with a movie, like, wow, that was cool. Then they become friends. Plus, you see it in your house. There's a big psychological difference there, too, because when you get to your house, when you're in your house, you're relaxed in a way that you're not even relaxed in a movie theater. Anytime the lights go down and you start watching entertainment, your suspension of disbelief goes away. That's why it's such a powerful thing. Jeremy pointed out, it's really true, that you can be in a movie theater on a Saturday afternoon, surrounded by 300 people in a dark room, and you've got a big box of popcorn in your lap, and you got a Coke in your hand. You're sitting there next to your girlfriend, and a werewolf jumps out of the forest, and you jump out of your chair. Why? Why do you jump out of your chair when you see? Why are you genuinely scared when you see a werewolf on a Sunday or a Saturday afternoon, surrounded by 300 other humans, when you know for a perfect fact that there's no such thing as werewolves? Why? It's because the act of watching a story or listening to a story disengages the critical functions of your brain. You have to turn those things off. If you really get down to brass tacks, when you watch Shakespeare on stage, for example, you see 2 men in a costume, and there is a suggestion, some kind of a suggestion of a wall, or in many cases, it's just a curtain. And you believe that you're in a castle in Denmark because of how a drape is hung. So when you're ready to sketch in those kind of details and ready to go along with the story, that's something fundamental, primal in the human animal, this ability to suspend your disbelief and go along with the story. Once that disbelief gets suspended, all those political messages come in through your eyes, go straight to your brainstem. You don't get to examine them at all. And I remember I saw Bowling for Columbine at a theater in, where was it? It wasn't in Santa Monica. I guess it was in West LA or something. And I was watching this movie in a room full of liberals. This is back when I really started doing this. And all this criticism of, of Republicans and conservatives and Bush and Christians and military and all this other stuff. And I went in there, shields up, like ready to just take this thing apart. And I'm watching it. And then by the time I'm an hour into this, I'm like feeling ashamed of myself. It's kind of like, I have to admit he's got a really good point there. I have to admit that really does make us look bad. I have to admit, and it's only when I'm out of the theater walking to my car, I go, wait a minute. And this is just the stuff I knew. Then you find out about the actual lies that he told, how he re-edited the Charlton Heston interview, so it was out of sequence, and then things that actually happened after things happened, and then the whole giving away of a gun in a bank, which is the beginning of the movie. It's kind of stupid to give away a gun in a bank. Well, it turns out, it turns out that they didn't give away a gun in a bank. They gave away a gun when you open a new account. You had to go to the gun store, and the giant manatee Michigan of mendacity decides he's going to have them give them the gun in the bank because it would look better on camera. And these lovely, honest people give Michael Moore a rifle in the bank because Michael Moore told him it'd be a really, really great promotion for them. And so the whole thing that he starts the movie off with never actually happened. It's just plain, flat-out lying. And so I remember coming out of that theater and thinking about all the things that I felt bad about. And just literally after I was in the car sitting there going, oh, wait a minute. Now, hold on. Wait a minute. But when you're in there, you can't follow the story and do that. You can't stop the story and say, hold on, let me think about this for a second. You just got to go. So it's an incredibly powerful thing, Donnie. And if I had a chance, I would do a recurring series like Breaking Bad or Walking Dead, something with a real budget and something that could look good. The number 3 question based on likes is from Robert Dickey, and this is an interesting question, actually. And it took me a second to understand what he was saying. He says, does our inability to tell a good story grant us some immunity to the narrative? And I think what he means by that is, I've made the case many times that we on the right have a terrible, terrible lack of being able to tell a decent story, that the rhetorical intelligence is a term that Evan Sayet uses in his book, The Kindergarten of Eden, which I highly recommend. That rhetorical intelligence is the ability to speak and construct stories and tell stories and be a storyteller and kind of do what I'm doing right now, the ability to just talk and presumably try to make it somewhat interesting. And we don't have an awful lot of that on our team. So the question is, because we don't naturally speak in the language of story quite as much as the left does, if I understand him correctly, is he saying, does that mean we're less susceptible to the enemy's narrative? And while I think the answer might be we might be somewhat less susceptible, and we understand that we don't like having our entire belief system trashed, so most conservatives haven't been to the movies in a long, long time, then I don't think the answer is yes, unfortunately, Robert. I think the fact is you don't appreciate how pervasive this is. How many of you have had this experience? How many of you have ever heard Rush Limbaugh say something, or maybe even heard me say something, where you just went, my God, I can't believe he said that. I can't believe he said that out loud. What guts? It's like, what are you really saying? What you're really saying is, this is a core belief of yours. It's true. And somebody actually came out and spoke the truth. You instantly recognize it as the truth. There was no question about whether it was true or not. Rush does this all the time, does it almost every day. And yet you go, I can't believe he said that. Why can't you believe he said that? You can't believe he said it because this pop culture narrative is so deep in your head that you don't even realize it. And one of the things I do when I go around doing the speaking engagements is when I talk to people, I say, you may not realize how powerful and pervasive and pernicious this effect is, but it is very powerful. So I'll stand up there and I'll say, so look, we've got different aged people in this room, so we're going to do 3 little experiments here. I'm going to start a sentence and you're going to finish it. If if I start a sentence and you finish it, you would agree that I had some sense of control over your mind, right? If I knew you well enough so that I could lay a first half of a sentence out there and you would finish it the way I wrote it, the way I wanted it to be finished, I'd have some fairly decent control over your mind, wouldn't you say? Most people agree with that. Say, all right, I'm going to start 3 different sentences and you can finish them for me. Ready? It's for your older people out there. Look, up in the sky, it's a bird. And everybody in the audience goes, it's a plane. It's Superman. I said, okay. Now for people more or less my age, just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip. And then you can hear people go, "It started from this tropic port aboard this tiny ship." Yep. And here's one for young people out there. Ready? It seems today that all you see, and they'll go, is violence in movies and sex on TV. So the point to make on this is, if you were one of those people, if I could say, look, up in the sky, it's a bird, and you knew how to go, it's a plane, it's Superman. The reason you can finish that sentence is because you've heard that expression many, many times. You used to watch Superman when you were a kid on TV. I saw it when I was a kid on TV. And that means that everything that went into your head is still in there. You can finish it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman because you know enough about Superman. You saw hours of Superman, and that means because you can say it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman, that means that everything else that Superman was about is in your head too, which means that everything about Superman, truth, justice, the American way, the idea that this is a good country, the idea that these are good people, the idea that Superman was not a force of oppression but a force of liberation. He represented America. America was a fundamentally good place. Superman is America. He's an alien raised by Americans, and that's why he's good. So you have a good view of America because you watch Superman. If you can finish the words from Gilligan's Island, that's a fairly politically neutral thing, as I like to say. The only real lesson you can take from that is if you want to get off the island, all you have to do is kill Gilligan. And then finally, if you can finish the thing from Family Guy, then that means that everything that comes with it is in your head too. If you saw enough episodes of Family Guy to be able to finish the theme song, then you know about all of the anti-Christian, anti-American, anti-business, anti-military, anti-everything that's in Family Guy, and that's in your head too. So it lives in your head, Robert, whether you like it or not, and you can't get away from it. And all you can do is try to understand the messages, but we have to start counter-programming, because the one thing that we have on our side is we don't just have truth. It'd be one thing if you were making the case that conservatives are speaking the truth to people, and that the truth is so unpleasant and so unbearable that it's a very, very tough sell. But that's not the case. We are speaking the truth, but the truth is not unpleasant or unbearable. The truth is freedom, and fast cars are fast cars, and hot women are hot women, and guns are cool and fun, and we have flags on the moon, and we want to fly through the air, and everybody should have 2 or 3 houses if they work hard enough and can afford them, right? So not only is the truth on our side, but fun is on our side, liberty is on our side, freedom's on our side, adventure is on our side, romance and thrills and heroism and all this stuff is on our side, and their side is what? Small, less, weak, whiny, quiet, conform, behave, do what we tell you. How do we not win this fight? I don't know. I don't know how we don't win it. But no, I don't think we get immunity from it, Robert. We may be somewhat more resistant, but it's so much out there. You're going to swim in those waters, you're going to get wet. And that's why we have to get in this fight. That's why we have BillWhittle.com. It's why we're trying to make these movies, because these movies will reach people who would never listen to me. 16, 17, 18-year-old boys and girls are going to go out and see this Bat movie, for example, and they're not going to think about the politics of it. It's just going to be a fun movie and cool aliens, and it was a big fight, and a lot of people had, it was action, and people had fun, and it was funny, and it got some laughs. They're not going to realize that these people have their own weapons. They're using their own AR-15s, and they are fighting a government that's trying to monitor them through their IMAX, and it's also predator strikes against people who are driving Winnebagos down the street, and they use things like iPhones for remote sensing and intelligence. Our guys do. It's a battle against the government, not just against these creatures. It's a battle to be individuals and to take the life your own life into your own hands. The idea that a group of ragtag individualists, real individuals, I mean nutcases, really kind of crazy characters, in the way that Buckaroo Banzai was filled with crazy characters. Team Banzai, everybody on Team Banzai is different. Everybody on Team Banzai is a little nutty. But they're funny, they're smart, and they're badasses, and they're on our side. But we're not talking about politics. We're not saying Mitt Romney. It's like, no, we're saying this is what freedom is. This is what independence is. This is what being armed is. This is what we're fighting. All people do is they go to the story and they see an adventure story and they leave and they think it's cool. Nothing make me happier than to have these people say, hey, you really ought to go check out Big Bad Problems on the way to the next Organizing for America meeting, because we'll hit them. Their guard will be down, and that's how they do it. They get us with our suspension of disbelief. They get us through the movies. They get us in the dark caves with the flickering lights on the walls, and they, paint bison and buffalo, and we sit there, and we read it. So, yeah, we got to get in this fight, and quickly, I think. The number 4 question was from T.M. Smith. Mr. Whittle, what is your take on the... Just call me Bill, by the way. What is your take on the Chinese thinking that pictures of the Halo Master Chief Halloween costume are real military technology? And I want a scathing rant with spittle on the camera lens. Good to know my reputation precedes me. I had not heard this story, but, the story is pretty self-evident in the question. Apparently, from this, there's a character in a video game series called Halo. And Halo takes place in the future, and so the characters are really up-armed and up-armored fighting men. And the iconic character from Halo is a character named Master Chief, and he's got a green uniform with kind of a gold bubble helmet. And everything is body armor, and everything's these badass weapons. So according to this question, I'm assuming that somebody's made these costumes. I have seen the costumes of Master Chief. They look photorealistic. They look really, 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 really good. And apparently somebody in the Chinese thought that these were pictures of our actual technology, not technology from 100 years ago. My reaction to this is good. I hope they think it's our technology. And it's encouraging to me that they do think that this futuristic warrior is in fact American soldiers, because our guys are badass and they're getting badder ass out there every day. Some of these new weapon systems that are under development are terrific. I don't know if you've ever seen this stuff from Boston Robotics. If you go to YouTube and look up, I'm pretty sure it's Boston Robotics, these robots that are constantly just moving to stay in balance, and they've got these things like these giant mules, and they'll charge up hills and deliver ammunition to soldiers, and if you kick one, it'll stagger and keep its balance. In fact, it's so lifelike. It's so the algorithms that they're using for these robots to stay balanced on either 2 feet or 4 legs is so accurate and so mimics biology that when you see a guy kick, it's not like this thing's dressed in a skin, by the way. You see the actuators and you see the springs and the shock absorbers of this thing just going doink, 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 doink. It's a bouncing robot, but it looks like a creature. And a guy will walk up from the testing lab, one of the technicians will walk up, and he'll kick it as hard as he can to show off how good the sense of balance of this thing is, and you get angry at this guy. It's like, don't kick that thing. You can't just walk up and kick something like that. Nobody has problems if you kick a garbage can. Nobody has problems if you kick something else. It's Boston Dynamics. I just see over there. Thanks. It just looks real. It looks like a creature. So, I think the answer here, TM, is if the Chinese think that the Master Chief costume represents actual or on the cusp of actual military technology, I think they're probably right, and I think we've earned that reputation. Our guys are really something. Now, some of this ammo, they've got ammo where they basically will take a rifle, and the rifle will send an invisible laser pulse out there in a frequency that we can't see, and it will calculate the distance to a wall, let's say, to the inch or half an inch or something. And then when you fire off a round, it will fuse the round so that it knows how fast the round is spinning. It knows how many rotations it would take to go that distance. And after that particular round does that many rotations, it just explodes. So they can set things up so that bullets explode inside of rooms. They explode behind barricades. It's unbelievable what we can do. And when you start getting into some of these heads-up displays and the amount of information that our soldiers already take into the field in terms of their GPS, in terms of their ability to communicate with other units, we have to stay ahead of this curve. We have to, because we're always outnumbered. We've always been outnumbered. Free people are always outnumbered by masses of cannon fodder, and we can't put those kind of numbers in the field, and our soldiers' lives are worth something. We are one of those countries. It's true in the West now, but it's always been especially true for Americans, I think. Our people are citizens. Our soldiers and our veterans are American citizens, and their lives are precious. They're not cannon fodder. We don't just throw them into the combat like they did with, when the Russians were defending Stalingrad. There's a pretty good movie, actually, called Enemy at the Gates about Stalingrad, and they didn't have enough rifles for their soldiers, so they sent one rifle in with every two guys. One guy had the rifle, and the other guy ran with him. And what's the other guy going to use for a rifle? Well, he's going to use the rifle of that guy when he gets shot. They'll pick up rifles. So, anyway, I'm glad they thought it was real. And it's probably not too far from being real. Where even now I've seen guys who are in real suits. There's apparently two ways you can augment human strength, and I suppose eventually speed, but strength is easier. One of them is to put them in a mechanical suit, kind of like the suit at the end of Aliens, the Power Walker, where you're literally using, hydraulics and steel, and it weighs a ton, and, you're really just mechanically using hydraulic energy and stuff to increase a person's strength. But now I've seen guys in suits where they're using things like bioelastics, where if you stimulate a certain substance with a little electric shock, it contracts. Then you're really actually talking about people getting into a bodysuit that multiplies their strength and presumably eventually their speed. And you give that some kind of Kevlar protection, and you've got a guy who's faster, stronger, and can run like hell and jump over buildings, and bullets can't hit him. We're seeing people wearing those prototypes today. It's not like, hey, that'd be nice someday. So this is one of the things I'm all about spending government money on. It's not many things, but that's one of them. We need to stay on top of this curve, because we'll never outnumber the Chinese. We always have to be better. We got to be better. Our airplanes have to take down 10 of theirs, and our soldiers have to be able to do that too. So anyway, that's what I think about that. Next question comes from Shelley Fox. I'm not a big fan of science fiction, and since you are, do you have any recommendations as to what I should read or watch that might get me more interested? A gateway drug, so to speak. I'm generally too practical for science fiction or fantasy, but I have the feeling I'd really enjoy some of it if I could get into it. Well, Shelley, if you don't generally like fantasy, sci-fi, good for you. There's certainly a place for it, and Star Wars, without question, is a fantasy story. There's virtually no science in Star Wars. Star Trek is far more scientific than Star Wars, but Star Trek is not exactly what I would call like hard science fiction. It's getting there every day, I have to say. I think your man is probably Arthur C. Clarke, Shelley. There's Rendezvous with Rama is a terrific sci-fi story. It's a very practical, hard sci-fi story. Just about everything Clarke wrote was really, really good in that regard. Then I think I could recommend Rendezvous with Rama. Childhood's End is Childhood's End's not so much hard sci-fi so much as Childhood's End's got the best twist in it of any book I've ever read, and is really a profound look at human nature and human evolution, and where human evolution is heading. And Childhood's End really gets into something that's always interested me, and that is, we see this. I won't give away anything in Childhood's End, but we see this all the time. We're often subjected in science fiction or fantasy to other races that are superior to us. The Vulcans are superior to humans virtually in every way. They're stronger, they're faster, they're far smarter, they can take a lot more heat, they can take a lot more cold, they can read your mind, they can communicate with each other telepathically, they just touch your shoulder and down you go. And the Vulcans, by every measure, should be super beings, and we should be their slaves, if not certainly a Vulcan Federation, which humans are allowed to, empty the ashtrays in. But it's not that way. And the same thing with the elves in Lord of the Rings. The elves are in every way superior to human beings. They're faster, they can see farther, they're quicker, they're much calmer, they're much smarter, they're much more educated, so on. and angels, far superior to people, and yet in all of these cases, it's a human federation, it's a human world. It's all of these cases deal with the fact that despite their flaws, their physical and emotional flaws, human beings are somehow or another better than these super beings. There's something that they're missing. The elves are missing something, and so are the Vulcans. There's something missing that humans have, and they don't, despite every single other advantage they have. It's so interesting, and that's definitely in Childhood's End. There's a book called a Heinlein book called Starship Troopers. The movie was just a joke, but the book itself is absolutely terrific, and the politics in Starship Troopers is really sound. It really just makes so much sense to me. Let's see what else. There's a book called Forever War. I think that was Haldeman who wrote Forever War. That's a terrific book, kind of an ongoing space battle book. Philip K. Dick is terrific. Clark is terrific. Haldeman's really terrific. And I would just say shop around and see what you like. There's a lot of people who are putting comments here in the comment section, and I think my favorite sci-fi story, probably in terms of reading, was probably Childhood's End. Starship Troopers is it's just so much fun. Anyway, it's out there. And I haven't had a chance to read any of the new stuff. The last sci-fi book I read was years ago, and I don't remember who wrote it. It was called In the Court of the Crimson Kings, and it was an alternate future kind of book where there were actual Martians on Mars. And the thing I liked about In the Court of the Crimson Kings was twofold. First of all, the Martians have a completely biological technology, and they got into a lot of detail with that. They go into this one abandoned building, and they're almost killed by these rampaging creatures, and it turns out that they were feral engines, that these were creatures that had been used to turn cranks to run some of the machines, and they'd escaped from their vehicles and had lived in this building, and they were just eating things. And they're feral engines. It's cool. They had biological goggles. They had biological everything. And the other thing I liked about In the Court of the Crimson Kings was that this culture was very old. I don't know if it was 10,000 years old. It might have been 100,000 years old. It was ancient, homogenous culture. Imagine Chinese culture had lasted for, had lasted for 5 millennia. So the thing about that was when you have a culture that homogenous for that length of time, they communicated in such subtle ways. It would be like a little tilt of a head, the slightest movement of their hand from their hip to their thigh, the little itty, tiny. Everything was so perfectly kabukied out, was so perfectly non-verbally communicated in these traditions and these etiquette paths had been there for millennia. I thought that was very, very cool too. But anyway, those are a couple, and hopefully you'll go look and you'll find some more. Excuse me, let's see, moving down the line here. I can do another couple, I guess. Allo Conson wants to know, when will you and Mike Rowe be on camera together discussing culture? Probably when Mike Rowe's finished making money for Ford. I got a chance to meet Mike. I haven't seen him in a couple years now. I've met him on a couple occasions, and he's absolutely everything you think he is. He's just the greatest guy. He's just an all-American guy with a great sense of humor, and he's just really lighthearted. Nothing seems to get under his skin. He's just this big, goofy, tough, all-American guy. Dirty Jobs is one of the most important shows that's ever been on TV. He's just great, and I'm an enormous fan of his, and it was nice to find out he was a fan of mine, and I've often thought about how much good Mike would do just by coming out and saying, hey, look, I'm a Republican or a conservative, but he can't do it. I'm not saying he can't. I know he's been pretty fearless about his politics as a general rule, but you have to understand, if Mike Rowe comes out as a guy who is a conservative, actively, openly, then he can't endorse Ford anymore. And to be perfectly honest with you folks, it's not fair that he would be able to endorse Ford anymore. I can't believe that Alec Baldwin is doing Capital One ads. I really do believe if you want to be a public figure in the motion picture business, your politics should stay with you. You have fans of both sides of this issue, and it gets more contentious every year. And if you come out as a strong liberal or a strong conservative, that 1 in 1,000, then you're alienating your fans. If you're out there every day like Sean Penn or oh golly, what's his name, Matt Damon, then I have no interest in seeing your movies. I'm not going to go see Matt Damon's movies. I'm not just even the ones that don't have the politics in it. I'm not going to go see. I'm not going to give any of my money. So it's really not fair to expect guys like that to do that. And I actually admire Mike for being that way. I admire anybody, even liberals who are public figures, and when they're asked about their politics, this is really my business and really doesn't have to concern you. So Mike is terrific. Dirty Jobs is one of the most American shows ever. It's a very important show. The whole idea was really important and brilliant, showing people, for those of you who may not have seen it on Discovery, it ran for years and years. He just went around and did the worst work in America. He'd work in a tannery, or he'd clean out, houses that had been abandoned, and go in someplace where there's a wasp infection. He's an amazing guy. But he really is. Mike Rowe really is the real deal. He's not acting. He's just a laid-back, tough, fun, neat guy who you could just sit down and have a beer with and wouldn't treat you any differently than anybody else. I really admire that about him and about people like that in general. A little more time here. Matthew Lloyd asks, best movie character and or actor of all time and why? I'm just going to go with my knee-jerk reaction on this one. I think Indiana Jones is the best movie character of all time. And I think Harrison Ford is the... You can't say Harrison Ford is the best actor of all time. That's obviously not true, but he's just my favorite. My favorite movie is not the best movie of all time. You make a couple cases for the best movie of all time. Citizen Kane's got a pretty good case to be made for it. I mean, Citizen Kane, I studied film. I was a filmmaker. I've studied film for years. Citizen Kane is, in so many ways, magnificent. It's just magnificent, and it's a great, great movie, and it's a fun movie to watch. I've seen it 2 or 3 times. It's hardly my favorite movie. My favorite movie is Aliens, and Aliens is a good movie. It's not a great movie, and I don't even like the director. I would have said Captain Kirk if you said television character, but you said movies, so I think I'm going to go with Harrison Ford on this, and Indiana Jones. And the reason I say Indiana Jones and Harrison Ford is because he said movies. And I think Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of the most perfectly made movies ever. It's perfectly made. Now, some people have said you do an analysis of it. If you take Indiana Jones out of the film, nothing changes. It basically everything happens, and so on. And I suppose that's interesting, but I don't care. There was everything about it was just fun and interesting and cool, and I don't know. That was my gut reaction. There was something about the way he fit into that character that I've never quite seen the likes of.